Welcome, everybody, to Sea King Banter. We are still in Season 1 regarding superheroes. This is a debate channel, of which we have two debaters today. Sea King and Virzu is back yet again. Welcome, Virzu.
Hello.
Today's topic is a little subversive. That being said, I will hand it over to Virzu to explain the details of the discussion today.
Thank you, Flair. So essentially, for this debate, me and Seeking will pretty much be discussing if powers for superheroes work best in a hard magic system or a soft magic system. Essentially, uh, I believe this was originated by someone named Brandon Sanderson, but a lot of times when it comes to powers and specifically magic, they categorize them into a hard system or a soft system. A hard system is for powers with rules. So, your power is limited by a specific set of rules that you can only do this with your powers. This can be seen in things like Avatar: The Last Airbender. You have things like trying to think D&D, most games, isekais, anything that kind of you get specific powers and they can only do certain things. Versus a soft magic system are powers that are more free flowing and free moving and aren't really limited by anything other than that person's strength of that power and creativity. This can be seen in a lot of animes. Lord of the Rings uses this power system and so on and so forth. So for the debate, it would essentially I will be arguing that powers exist better in a more soft magic system versus Seeking would be debating that it exists better in a hard magic system. And to be clear, we're discussing this for the sake of powers, not necessarily magic. Obviously, for some people, they do have magic as a power, like Doctor Strange, Scarlet Witch, Raven, Santana, and we'll cross that bridge when we get there.
Now, as you all know by now, I am an entirely unbiased moderator and do not believe that it would be better for one participant or the other to go first. That being said, uh, heads or tails, Virzu?
Tails.
Oh, would you look at that? It's tails. You go first.
Wow. Okay, that was crazy. Uh, fine. I guess I deserve that. So essentially, me personally, I believe that um, powers work better in a soft magic system because I believe it is best when people can evolve and expand their powers based off of normal means and kind of give certain filler characters, for lack of a better term, kind of a chance to kind of step into their own and have their own spotlight rather than remaining in this filler character section. In X-Men, you have characters like Jubilee, who is a side character, and we don't really get much expansion on her power, but and all we ever see her do is fireworks. But with softer system, you can definitely expand Jubilee's powers to where she could do more and not just be fireworks. She could get to the point where she could be like Starfire and be, shooting light beams and stuff like that. Especially in comparison to other X-Men who are in a softer system, like Scarlet Witch, who has chaos magic, and that is truly never defined. And we've seen her do quite literally anything and everything. So I do believe that power systems work better in a softer system.
Do you yield your time?
Yes.
All right. Hello. My name is C King, and I'm going to be arguing that powers, especially when it comes to anime, manga, comics, or games, work much better in a hard magic system. You see, when you have a hard magic system, it really cuts down on what I like to call bullshit. You see, a lot of anime, especially anime, comics, all these things are fluttered with bullshit. And that same bullshit tends to end up ruining franchises because it basically allows for infinite growth. And infinite growth makes it to where at some point it becomes uninteresting to watch, to read, or to play. A perfect example of this would be Superman. As much as I love Superman, I love the concept of Superman, Superman's powers are seemingly infinite because he has no system. We just have to go based off of, you know, his word, right? So now we have to take his word for whatever the hell he can do, and he can just come up with some crap like, oh, well, actually, I had psychic barriers in the back of my mind where I was actually limiting myself by 50%. And it's like, okay, so I'm supposed to believe that you let thousands of people die because you didn't want to, what, undo 50%? Like, it doesn't make any sense. There's a lot of superheroes that have that same thing when it comes to their soft powers or soft magic, anyways. Let's just say soft ability, where it just doesn't make any sense. Versus when you have hard magic, it also allows creativity to kind of flourish. So you understand the parameters of what these people can do. And actually, I'd like to give technically Harry Potter would be a little bit, even though I think that Harry Potter might be considered soft magic. I think that it's.
Harry
Go ahead.
Harry Potter, based off of my understanding, is most people's benchmark for what's in the middle.
Okay, yeah, that's the thing. I'm glad you said that because after thinking about it, even though the capabilities for magic are seemingly endless, I would consider it more hard magic. The reason being is because you can't Avada Kedavra harder, right? You have Harry Potter who's been in school for like 6 years versus an 80-year-old dark master lord wizard, but when they use the same spells at each other, they're damn near of equal power. No, I can understand why that's in the middle because the beams are fighting and it's going back and forth, and I don't know, willpower or whatever the hell can be kind of an influence. I guess I don't know, maybe magical fuel, but all in all, I think that's a good example to some extent of hard magic. The reason being is because they have set spells that do set thing, and everybody can use them as long as you're able to use magic. So that's what I'm going to be basically arguing tonight. And with that, I will yield my time. So, how do you want to go ahead and start doing this?
Well, so far we have soft magic allowing for characters to be able to shine, so to speak, giving them room for growth or deeper attention later on in the plot line, versus hard magic, which poses that infinite growth is uninteresting, as well as the idea that laws allow for creativity. If either of you have any standout objections to any of the previous comments, then feel free to speak on the matter.
As far as like the opposing counsel's argument
Of
or
course.
our own. Okay. Um, I would say that I don't. I can see how the infinity level of a soft magic power system would be concerning because we've seen it done bad a lot of times. We've seen people kind of get to the point of, okay, well, you were quite literally like running around doing normal everyday stuff, and now we're out here fighting in space. And it's like, okay, how did we get here? So I can see that, but I think that's just a matter of things done incorrectly. Um, I would say that I think it's definitely a I think a soft magic power system pretty much doesn't make it to where people can get to infinity, but it makes it to where people can break out of a niche power. And a great example of that, in my opinion, would be Invisible Woman. Invisible Woman original power was just invisibility, and thus she couldn't keep up with her counterparts of as far as power goes, especially in a world as vast as Marvel. But because of the way they used her power in a more softer system, she was able to kind of now use her invisibility powers and define that as the bending of light and then move that into force fields. Now, obviously, yes, it is a stretch, but because of that softer system, it is a stretch that I think overall made her character a lot more interesting, a lot more threatening, and we got to see truly the expansion of a simple power like invisibility.
Right. So let me ask you a question. What's to stop Invisible Woman from shooting beams?
Well, technically, she, to an extent, can shoot beams, but she mainly shoots her force fields. But I mean, technically,
I mean,
I
like,
don't know how consistently she can shoot a force field to make it into a beam.
that's what I'm saying, right? I'm talking about, like, let's just say she wanted to use a solar beam, just like in Pokemon. So she takes her barrier, she bends the light, and then solar beam.
Well, technically, I believe Invisible Woman's powers are described either by the bending or absence of light, or I think it is the bending of light. Um, but that technically wouldn't work because it would be the concentration of light or the creation of light, which is something that I don't think is really in her realm of power. Now, if um, yeah, no, I can't really see in a way in where she could bend it into a concentrated force. You know what I mean?
I think I can, and I think I basically just somewhat explained it. If you, during the day, let's just say in the middle of a summer day, because obviously you wouldn't be able to do it at night because moonbeams wouldn't be nearly as strong unless you're closer to the moon. But let's just say you're in the middle of the day and in the middle of a summer day, sun is beaming down, almost similar to how microscopes, or not microscopes, magnifying glasses can bend light in a way to where it shoots concentrated light and can burn things. Why wouldn't she then be able to take that same principle, bend light, and then create laser beams?
For that, I'll have to further look at her powers to define that because I'm not 100% sure if it's the bending of light or absence of light. Because essentially, her powers, what they do is they kind of warp light to where it everything is not invisible, which is why she can make force fields, is because she's warping that. But as far as actual laser beams of light, it technically wouldn't work because she's not. I'm not too sure about how magnifying glasses work, but she's not necessarily, you know, concentrating a
Here's
light
the
beam.
thing, right? This is not necessarily a situation where, well, I don't know if it works with this and I don't know if it works with that. It's you really don't understand at a real level how her powers work. And I think it's intentionally vague how her powers work. They might be able to give you some mumbo jumbo bullshit in regards to how they think it works and hope and they pray and hope to God no real scientist or anything like that will try to double check them. But you have to realize that their powers are kept intentionally vague on purpose for the sake of the story. So her upper limit is infinite. I don't see how you throw barriers.
Well, I agree with you that they are intentionally kept vague, but I feel like that is overall to the benefit. Throwing a barrier is more of not necessarily a physical action, but a kind of symbolic action. It's like when people like grit their teeth or someone swings their arms, use telekinesis. You don't need to do it, but it's that act of motion that kind of helps propel that forward as far as the throwing it goes.
Well, when people move their arms or anything of that nature when it comes to using powers, it's in a way helping them visualize what they want to do with said power, right? Like you said, in reality, with a certain level of mastery, they wouldn't have to do that. It's not like hard magic where you have to do certain hand movements or gestures in order to do an ability. What you're doing is you're trying to focus your ability, and it kind of helps you visualize what you want to do. Like, let's say you want to crush somebody, so you take both your hands and you clasp them together. It's not necessary, but it does help you visualize what you're trying to do.
Sorry, can you repeat that last part one more time?
Um,
I was reading something.
okay, I was saying it's not like if let's say you wanted to crush somebody, it's not necessary to like, oh, I'm gonna take my two hands and clasp them together so that you crush something, but at the same time, it helps you visualize what you want to do.
I understand that, but as seen in many forms of media, a lot of times it's really unnecessary and mainly just shows a lack of skill, which is why I said it's more of a symbolic thing. If anything, it's more for the viewers than it is for the actual person to need to use that power. But as far as the Invisible Woman goes, um, her a lot of people like Invisible Woman and stuff like that tend to use softer systems, and they, like you said, they keep it vague, but they mainly keep it vague in terms of using what many people just call a force. It's not always the best explanation, but it gives the viewers and the audience a sense of imagination with these powers. It doesn't become as strict because elsewise, with the bad guys that the Fantastic Four are fighting, they would be severely underpowered because you have pretty much an anchor and a half. I'm not gonna say who the half is, but in this case, if Invisible Woman was only able to be invisible, she, wouldn't be able to help.
I can make the argument that with a hard system, the bad guys wouldn't endlessly ramp up. That's the issue when you have a soft system of any kind of powers inside of a world, is that the bad guys get stronger and stronger and stronger until you get into the realm of bullshit, almost similar to Gurren Lagann. Tengen Toppa Gurren Lagann is an anime about mechs, and because the bad guys kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger, eventually they got into robots that were so insanely large that it expanded outside of the known universe, and then they made drills that were even bigger than that. So you had drills that were bigger than space and time and the entirety of the universe, so much so that it could the entirety of the known universe could barely fit on the tip of the drill. But in a hard system, it shows you the different sides of the system and different sides of ability without the endless need to ramp up your bad guys to absurdity.
Um, I will disagree with you because I think that is a matter of the usage of the system, not the system itself. The reason why those things happen is because, obviously many shows go way past the need of their story. And in those cases, these shows then need to keep upping the kind of risk factor and the danger, so they continue to increase power. that is more of a that's more of a flaw in the usage of the system versus the actual system itself.
Not necessarily. I'll give you a good example of what I'm talking about, where it has the same power scaling, but within the system, and it's basically I'm going to compare Naruto, which I think is a perfect example of a hard system, versus let's just say, um, let me think of a soft system. Now, I will say this: when I was looking up soft and hard systems, somebody brought up Avatar: The Last Airbender as a hard system, which I don't believe. I do not believe that Avatar: The Last Airbender is a hard system when it comes to magic or ability. I think it's a soft system because there's
I believe that they're both hard systems in the sense that both have specific rules. Like waterbenders can only bend water. They're not bending liquid. However, I do believe that the flaw in hard systems and the flaw with both of those shows, not necessarily Avatar, but I do believe that hard systems are inconsistent, which is why it's hard to gauge when sometimes systems are hard or soft. And it's because I feel like they're inconsistent. You have main characters or main bad guys who kind of exist in a softer system to where they really don't have limitations to their power and they continue to ramp up. But then you trap everybody else in a hard system in which they can't grow.
right. Um, one moment. Can you guys hear me a little better?
I can hear you fine.
Oh, there was some Green Queen in the chat was saying it's hard to hear me, so I tried to turn up my mic, but I'm trying to make sure that the sound is okay because I'm also getting a little bit of feedback. Okay, better. All right, if the feedback is a little bit too bothersome, let me know and I'll try to fix that real fast. But I didn't hear the last thing you said about Avatar: Last Airbender.
Oh, I was saying that I believe that sometimes it can become, it said better, but versus loud. I can turn myself down if need be.
No, you're fine. I think your volume is fine. It's more like I don't care how well they can hear you versus me and the aspect that you're louder.
Um,
I'm just trying to make sure because the tapping that you guys are hearing is the feedback, and that's I don't know why it does that. I just got this mic and it's a little annoying that it kind of picks up this feedback. Um, if it gets too bothersome, let me know, and I might have to like take a bit of a timeout to try to fix it.
but I was pretty much saying how I feel like hard systems like Naruto and to an extent like Avatar kind of exist in a hard power system, but then um, kind of utilizes soft power systems when convenient. And this kind of, I believe, makes it hard for certain people to feel valuable or feel necessary even at all because you're essentially kind of have an inconsistency that's damaging, the overall scaling of the world.
Right. Well, that's the thing. I think that in reality, what you're saying makes sense, but I would almost put Avatar: The Last Airbender in the middle category um, with Harry Potter. The reason being is because, like you're saying, they utilize soft systems when it's convenient, but the hard system is just, oh well, these people can use this element, and so in reality, I don't see how like you have some people like let's just say the Avatar, like Avatar Kyoshi, can damn near move islands and continents. But then you have other people who are not the Avatar that can't necessarily do that, and what exactly is the difference in their ability beyond the fact that you're the avatar, right? It's like what makes the avatar so much better at moving things, at moving elements than regular people, and how do necessarily are you getting stronger? Is it like mana, chakra, ki, chi? Like what exactly is assisting you when it comes to moving bigger shit?
Um, I will answer that question, but just for the chat, uh, a hard power system is essentially powers that exist in a certain rule set. So powers that can only do certain things based off of these parameters. Um, Examples of this, which I'll get into uh, after, but like Avatar: Last Airbender and other medias, any games like D&D or like Diablo or stuff like that all exist in a hard power system because there's rules to it. You know, if you're a fire mage, you only use fire, and then your fire is just burn fire versus a soft power system is more kind of loose in which power can grow and change and form into different versions of themselves, as we discussed with like Invisible Woman earlier, and how her power is invisibility, but it can kind of grow and evolve into where she can do force fields and make people go blind with her invisibility powers and stuff like that. And so we're discussing which system we think is more beneficial. But as far as the Avatar thing goes, I think the reason why these people are stronger and can do better stuff and move mountains and all this stuff and continents is why I think star systems excel the most is because it's about prowess, expertise, and skill with your power rather than what your power is. And I think that's what makes soft systems special, is because everyone can have a power, but it's the ability to do something with that power. You have avatars who are more in tuned to what their power is and the understanding of it and have a stronger willpower to where they can, move continents and move stuff like that. That's why Toph can sense earth in metal and kind of expand her powers through expertise and understanding. And it kind of gives all people essentially uh, the same foundation starting point of you can get to the minimum of where you're kind of just stuck in whatever your power is, but you could also break it open and expand it to where you don't just have to move rocks and punch them. You could do metal bending and stuff like that.
Now, that just seems arbitrary to me. The reason being is, let's just say you have let me think. Like, so if you had a geologist in that world, like let's say you transported a geologist from our world who had a doctorate degree into that world, will that person be stronger than Avatar Kyoshi when it came to earthbending because his understanding of Earth is better?
I think it will give them a better foundation, but obviously other factors go into it, which is why, softer systems are looser. More things play into fact. It could be obviously Kyoshi as an avatar is more attuned to the spirit realm and spirit world where bending kind of originates and comes from. You know what I mean?
Right. And this is why I said systems like Naruto are perfect examples of a hard system where, at the minimum, it explains why these certain beings are able to be stronger than others, right? I was going to use this as an example, and I was going to use Avatar example as the other one, right? Well, it won't even necessarily go with what I was trying to say, mostly because the bad guys don't necessarily ramp up to like insane degrees in Avatar: The Last Airbender. It's just people bending, right? and then being maybe more creative. A good example would be, I don't want to keep using Gurren Lagann because I know you haven't seen it. Um, what's an example of a world where the bad guys ramp up to almost insane, to an insane degree?
Um,
Mod, any ideas?
I'm mulling it over.
I mean, there's a couple, obviously, there are worlds where the ceiling is rather high, like, the world of like Sailor Moon, where the ceiling is high, you know what I mean, for power. And so you, I, granted, I don't remember who the strongest villain in that was, but, you have instances like that. You have people like Scarlet Witch and other children of X-Men where the ceiling's rather high. Granted, they're not all villains, but
Right. I'm just trying to. Um, it's not necessarily what I was talking about. Um, just one second. I'm trying to just think of some good examples. Uh, I feel like it's gonna take forever. You know what? I can't think of a overpowered bad guy per se. Let's just, I'm going to use the Hulk. Assume the Hulk is a bad guy. He's been a bad guy several times within his world. So let's just take Planet Breaker Hulk, right? When you see the Hulk, it's just his whole thing is the anger he gets, the stronger he gets, right? So you have this guy who's infinitely, it seems, getting angrier and angrier. I'm personally surprised he hasn't died of an aneurysm, but it would, to a normal person, it would seem that his anger would cap at some point. But it's getting so strong to where this dude is basically throwing hands with death on a regular basis, and it's literally insane. And then you go to the perfect world of Naruto. The reason I say Naruto is because you have jutsus, you have taijutsu, which is just fighting, genjutsu, which is illusions, and then you have ninjutsu, which is the power, right? And you have certain powers that everybody can damn near learn, unless they're like a hereditary trait in which you have certain people like the Uchihas who can do certain things better than others and things of that nature. But the explanation for why these people can use the abilities better all stems down to the experience and expansion of chakra. They can hold more chakra, they have a better quality of chakra, and then they're able to use these abilities vastly better than the people around them. So you're able to quantify it in a way, or at least give a logical explanation to why this person can do what he's doing. Versus when you have the Hulk, just going around and getting angrier and angrier and angrier to the point to where you can throw him from Jupiter to the earth, and then he just gets up and brushes it off because anger. Like that's the threshold. You got matter. It's like when's the top limit of how angry you get? I get pretty damn mad. I don't get stronger as a result of it.
I can definitely see where you're coming from, and I can see how, things like that can get kind of like stale to an extent. It's like that's what we're going with. But even with Naruto, I do believe that to an extent a softer system would have aided them a lot better because there are definitely a lot of jutsus and especially legacy jutsus, the ones from families, I feel like are lacking and could do a lot more. For instance, you have people like Ina Shikacho, which is the team of Ino, Shikamaru, and Choji, my favorite team, and undoubtedly the best team if we're being honest. Um,
No.
kind of suffers from a kind of suffers because, as far as actual power level goes, as far as due to their hard power system. You have kind of Team Seven, who is obviously the strongest team due to, you know, pretty much just raw chakra versus, and it kind of just puts them at such a far lead to where it feels like anybody who's not in Team Seven is pretty much like lacking extremely far behind, which is why you had, even with Sakura, who is in Team Seven, so much backlash on just her part alone because people felt like she wasn't keeping up. And I believe this is simply because of the heart system. You have characters like Ino, who on paper has an incredibly strong line of jutsu due to her family, the power to control people's mind and kind of link mental, um, and kind of link people's brains and stuff like that. Is a power we've seen in a lot of other people, but it's just used extremely on a such lower scale to where it's almost not really necessary for her to have that power.
Well, you have to also let's look at a different team, and Lord forgive me for not getting this team number right, but that doesn't seem to hinder Rock Lee's team. And the reason being is because, like you said, sure, Naruto's team does seem to have a lot more chakra, which is why they're able to outperform in a lot of other ways. But Rock Lee's team seemed to focus a little bit more on the skill side when it came to their taijutsu, not just their chakra. And so they were able to um, break out of monotony and do cool things and things of that nature. And they were still able to do it within that system and become damn near detrimental to a lot of different situations. Just in reality, Inushikacho just kind of got the raw end of the deal because their powers are incredibly niche, right? Don't get me wrong, I think Choji kind of carries that team. Um, Shikamaru's intelligent, which is his big thing, right? But like has a her ability, albeit strong, has a glaring weakness, and so it's like their abilities were just capped to begin with. Even in the soft system, the only like if we were in a soft system, and that's the thing that I think that people need inside of these systems, which I think we're probably going to get into soon, is weakness, right? Because when you have soft systems, people can explain away their weaknesses or add on more weaknesses, or sorry, not add on, but take away from weaknesses. So now it's like, oh yeah, well, I'm super strong, but if I try and I believe, I'm no longer weak to kryptonite.
Well, that's actually, I believe, the biggest fallacy when it comes to soft systems. I do believe soft systems actually are best and excel because of their inherent weaknesses. That's why you have things like Superman. Superman is weak to kryptonite because obviously in a soft system, it does become a matter of who has the most power. And then obviously, you do have a lot of times things like power or friendship or whatever they want to throw in there. But the importance of a soft power system is it makes people have to go outside the lines to find a solution to their issue, where people can say, okay, let me go get stronger or let me find a weakness to this person, which is where you get into things like, okay, let's find kryptonite for the Superman, let's find fire for Martian Manhunter. It's like you have to have weaknesses for these characters. Things like Escanor from Seven Deadly Sins. His power, he works best during sunlight, and during sun, he's extremely strong, the strongest person in the world almost. And through that, you can see the soft system in the show Seven Deadly Sins, but they have to excel at weaknesses for that show because of that. Where Escanor is only strong during the day.
I could make the argument that it makes the weaknesses crappier in a way. I don't think it excels when it comes to up to weaknesses because the weaknesses aren't believable, right? Because when you have a weakness when it comes to an ability, like there's a natural drawback. It's almost a form of balance, of give and take. Okay, you get a stronger ability, but the downside is that you leave your body, right? So you can take over somebody else's mind, but your body is now vulnerable. It makes a certain level of sense. Versus, can you guys hear me? Hello?
We can hear you. I'm not sure about the chat.
Oh, okay. It says back. You kind of worried me for a second. Okay. Um, I'll just say what I was saying again. I don't think it basically excels when it comes to weaknesses because when you have a explained weakness, it's like give and take. It's a certain level of equilibrium, where okay, I can take over somebody else's mind, but it leaves my body um, exposed, right? Because I have to leave my mind to go into your mind. And so it's a certain level of organicness when it comes to their weaknesses. However, when you have weaknesses like kryptonite, or I can't think of any other freaking weakness, but like a lot of those people even don't even have weaknesses to begin with. But or they're self-imposed weaknesses, like Martian Manhunter's fire. It's like, so if this dude had good relationships with fire his entire life, then he just wouldn't have a weakness, right? So he would just be that. So you either have self-imposed weakness because of some trauma, which doesn't sound very organic, or you have a video game bad guy weakness, where it's like, oh, I'm gonna swing once, swing twice. Let me turn around and expose the big crystal on my back so you can get your opportunity. It's not organic. It's bullshit.
Well, I I don't think it's necessarily inorganic. I think that's just a matter on how well it's done. Obviously, in a world like DC, where you have Marvel and DC have a weird thing where they kind of exist in this in between, where certain characters exist inside a soft system and some exist inside of a hard system. Superman, Scarlet Witch, Zatanna all exist in soft system to where they don't really have rules and thus have weaknesses versus other people in that world don't have hard set rules with their powers like a lot of the X-Men and besides Scarlet Witch, but a lot of the X-Men like Nightcrawler and Storm, it's like they have a harder system with their powers. Granted, they can still be strong, but their powers are their powers.
I don't know about Storm having necessarily a harder system. Granted, her ability is just controlling the weather, right? But it's like, how much could you control the weather? Like, how do you control the weather harder? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
what I like to call the fly faster fallacy that I'm making up on the spot with Superman, right? If Superman takes to the sky and begins flying, how does he fly faster? Like, what in him makes him fly faster? And so it's the same thing with Storm. If Storm's ability, and I guess what Frogirl said as far as like drizzle versus, well, a tsunami is not necessarily an equivalent. It would be more like a monsoon. So let's just say you have Storm, who's like, okay, I'm going to make it rain. Okay, so you make it rain. Now, how do you make it rain harder? That's what makes it to me more soft than hard. Like Nightcrawler was a great example. Nightcrawler's ability is thusly teleport. Right? That's it. He has the hardest system damn near in all of X Men. It's just to, and I will also technically give Cyclops that same level of hard system, right? Because he just has beams out of his eyes. And with through a device, it controls the level of beam, but that beam, if he took them shits off, is consistent. It's not stronger beams, it's not softer beams, it's just beams.
And that's, to me, is I think the detriment of those characters. I'm a very big advocate of side characters. I've always loved side characters, and I think side characters is really what makes a story kind of feel alive. And honestly, I tend to like them more than main characters. But side characters tend to exist in this hard power system, which I think hurts them when put against main characters with soft power systems. Continuing using the X-Men, like you said, we have people like Jean Grey and Wolverine who, their limits are kind of crazy and thus can be seen as a softer system. But, a soft power system does not have to mean limitless. In these worlds, it's limitless because that's what they kind of needed to be at that time. But soft system, all it means is that your reason for how strong or how little strong you are is inherent on something outside of the rule set and the guidelines of your power. It's more based off of, like I said previously, your attunement with that power, your skill level with that power. So if Nightcrawler, let's say for instance, now granted, I'm not 100% sure on this because I don't study Nightcrawler, but isn't his teleportation like going through somewhere? Like he's not actually blinking in and out, but he's like traveling in between. Because I
Yeah,
remember during a show he like traveled between,
hell.
I think it was hell.
Yeah, he travels technically through hell. Think of hell. You've played Minecraft, right?
Yes.
Think of hell like the Nether. In the Nether, for every one block that you walk in the Nether, I think it's like 5 blocks on the overworld. So it's basically a way of traveling quickly. It's actually a very apt description. So traveling through the netherworld to a different location, I think it would be similar to that. So that's why people make nether highways in Minecraft because it's just faster than it is to run the entire way or walk or fly.
Okay. And so in that instance, I think people like Nightcrawler and even Cyclops to an extent could benefit from a softer system, not to make their power limitless to where he's now teleporting, you know, hell onto, in the White House, you know what I mean? Like I'm not saying we need to have him teleport fire and brimstone places because, that's how his power works now. No, but he can um kind of use his power more creatively based off of how we understand it. If he only can go to hell, then teleporting people there with him and dropping them off like a drive-by, you know what I mean? In that instance, or even like let's say in like obviously the movies, when he teleported there was like a fog that kind of came in and out. If he was able to kind of play with that more and kind of use that more, but essentially kind of just breaking him out of the barrier where he could do something. I think it more benefits Cyclops because obviously just having beams come out of your eyes is kind of crazy. You know what I mean? If he could obviously turn it off and on, that would be helpful. But even can he only have it come out of his eyes or can he like, use a different part of his body?
Yeah,
Can we do hands?
yeah. Here's the thing, though. In a soft system, I think that would obviously be possible. But here's the big overarching issue that I have when it comes to soft systems. I think soft systems incentivize laziness because you don't have to be creative. When you look at people's fan favorites, it tends to be people who have harder systems, like Nightcrawler. Nightcrawler is a fan favorite all over the world because it's not just, oh, well, I can do. I don't even know how you would really do that with him because it's almost locked into being a hard system. You have one ability, and that's roughly about it. You don't have other, like, let's just say demonic abilities like breathing fire or some crazy shit. And it forces you to be creative, right? So you have Nightcrawler who has his one ability, and even though you could say you can put her in almost the same category as Jubilee, where it's like, oh well, you have the one ability, and albeit useful, it's not necessarily like a damaging ability or anything, right? So you have to now be creative with how you're doing things. Or hell, let's just say in a soft system, he could teleport like items, right? So now you can throw a dagger, and then it teleports the dagger, and it stabs a nigga in the chest. So let's just say that it does that. Um, then it what's call it? But you can't do that, so now you have to be creative. Just like one of the best scenes that almost anybody could say happened would be like in X-Men 2, right, where Nightcrawler went to go into the White House. Even though his power is simple and it's a hard power, he had the ability to teleport around while fighting and all this other kind of crap, and it was super dope. Right, probably the best scene in that whole entire movie. Nobody cared that Jean used her ability to hold a dam or nothing like that. Like if you ask somebody, "Hey, what's your favorite scene from X Men 2?" They'd be like, "Oh man, you remember the beginning when they started strong with Nightcrawler doing the absolute most?" And so I think that when you have soft systems, it just makes you lazy. Like, oh, okay, well, I'll just erg harder. I don't have to think about it anymore. I don't have to be creative. I'll just think harder, or push harder, or run faster, or fly faster. And so that's the thing. It's like, it's just not creative.
I don't think it's necessarily uncreative because all a soft power system does is technically promote creativity through, things like willpower and understanding. You have people who can kind of go into new things because of that kind of free will and liberty with certain things, which is why I'll bring up another great scene when Toph invented metal bending. It's like, or when Katara does water or blood bending. Both scenes are super cinematic, and I think it's because, they kind of break open this system that they're in. It's like, okay, yes, we can only do earth, or I can only technically bend water, but the bridge to these other forms are kind of what makes it be like, oh snap, they've reached a new level of this power beyond other people, making just them feel cooler, makes them like how people be like, oh, their peak, like you know what I mean? It's like,
Right.
and you can see where other people kind of lack in that system, where you have like airbenders in the same world who kind of don't have that moment, and I think they tend to suffer in popularity because of that.
Well,
Granted, there was only one, but still.
but here's the thing, though. Wouldn't that technically be arguing my side in a way? Because if we're saying that technically Avatar: The Last Airbender is a hard magic, then them being having a greater understanding that metal is also comprised of earth, because that's technically what it is, right? It's just melted stone or a type of stone, right? An element. And so I don't see how that necessarily argues your point.
It's about the essentially me bringing up that was to show that it's yes, it still is in that power. I'm not saying that people's powers should then break into craziness. I'm not saying that Nightcrawler, with his power of teleportation, should be able to teleport meteors and smack people in the faces with the meteor to stop Thanos. I'm not saying that. But I think to remain in your power but expand it is incredibly important to the evolution of a character to show growth, which is why I think people like Nightcrawler, uh, kind of need a softer system to an extent to where they can say, hey, yes, you all you do is teleport, but is it that crazy for him to kind of teleport other things? You know what I mean? Not necessarily saying that you have to now teleport meteors and mountains. That's a matter of poor writing and, power scaling. But
But that's
the
what that leads
ability to
to.
teleport things.
But that's the thing. That's what soft systems lead to. They don't stop at, okay, well, let's just be creative, right? Because I understand that soft magic can still be creative, but again, it incentivizes non-creativeness. It goes from creativity to bullshit, right? So now instead of, because it opens the door for the bullshit. That's the point. Hard magic basically puts a ceiling. It says you can't go above this ceiling. However, soft magic is basically the sky. It's endless. You can go out into the atmosphere, above the moon. You can pass Jupiter all the way to out of the Milky Way galaxy. And so that's the problem with it, is that there's no ceiling. So now, when you open up the floodgates when it comes to Nightcrawler's powers, he can teleport other things. He doesn't have to touch them. He doesn't have to be near them. Now he just put his hands up like he's doing the spirit bomb, and then meteors from outer space are going to start crashing into the Earth because he teleported them there. And then, oh wait, hold on, guys, watch this. And then he teleports to the moon, and now the moon slams into the Earth, and everybody dies. That's the
I
problem when it comes to soft systems.
I disagree with you because again, that's a matter of usage. Think of it as a coloring book. If you have a coloring book, you a hard system is you coloring in the lines. You're supposed to use this color for this. This color only goes here. It's like paint. It's like you've seen those color by numbers things.
Yeah.
It's like that. This color can only go here. It's in the lines. That's it. But a soft system allows you to color outside the lines, so where you can do whatever you want. But the thing is, there's this concept that I think is what I'm trying to kind of break open, is that there is no ceiling, and there is. Just because you color out the side of the lines doesn't mean that you can't stay on the page. You know what I mean? It's like you have people who use it incorrectly, in which they color outside the page, and they start drawing on walls. And to those people, they didn't get smacked as a kid. To an extent, at a certain point, that just becomes poor teachings for you to not know how to stay at least on the page. But as far as a soft power system, you can stay on the page and kind of have creativity. You can still move around to where the ceiling is what you set it. And if you know how to write a story, which is what I think I'm trying to kind of convey, if you know how to write a story well, a softer system is always going to be better. Because in, let's say, now granted, I haven't watched Lord of the Rings, so you can correct me, but as far as I know, Lord of the Rings is obviously one of the best pieces of fiction. And you, so with Lord of the Rings, obviously they work in a soft power system to where it's not necessarily super defined, but they have a certain level of a ceiling. It's just not as constrictive. You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying. Lord of the Rings is technically a soft um, magic system. Hey, Marshmallow 31. Glad you can join us. But to what you were saying, Lord of the Rings is technically a soft system, and I understand what you're saying to some extent. But here's the thing: why give yourself that temptation? Why give yourself that out? I think again, it kind of it's like it's like I'm trying to think of an apt example. It's like putting crack in the middle of a room full of crackheads, right? Like, yeah, sure, nobody in here uses crack, but why put the temptation there, right? Why put that there as a whole when nobody I appreciate you, Marshmallow 31. Thank you. I appreciate you a great deal. That being said, why give the temptation at all, right?
You never know, Sea King. The crack might match the drapes.
Not that kind of
What?
crack. I'm talking about coke, dope, crack, smack, white
I
girls,
know,
booger
that's what I'm
sugar.
saying. Like,
That's
what
all.
if it goes well with the lamp?
Shut up. Like, you're not even making any sense. My point is, why give yourself by the way, I draw some amazing drawings in my free time. Would you like to see them? Maybe later. I appreciate that. Um, but what was I gonna say? Yeah, it's just I am on Discord. But real fast, what was I gonna say? Yeah, this thing. It just adds an out, right? So I don't see the point in you even putting that there to where now it's like, okay, because what happens when you write yourself into a corner? When you write yourself into a corner, then you have that out of, okay, well, damn, now I'm going to have to make up some bullshit. And so now you can just, I'm going to need you guys to stop arguing about who's an AI and who's not in the chat, please. Like, it's not that important. They're just a very kind person, and I appreciate them for the follow. Okay, oh, I
As
didn't.
far as the whole crack in a room situation goes, um, I think that obviously, yes, it can be tempting to kind of go bigger and better, which tends to happen in series that kind of go far to an extent. You know, these you have, certain powers and stuff like that to where, once shows kind of hit that season 5 mark, which let's be honest, at season 5 everything goes downhill. But usually once shows or anything kind of hits that season 5 mark, then it gets like, okay, well now we're just kind of making stuff up because we're running out of ideas. And in that case, I think the biggest argument in that case is just end the show. You don't have to write yourself in a corner, just write an ending. If you write yourself an ending, you don't end up in a corner. Geez, end right before you get to the corner. You know what I mean? So it's like you don't have to write yourself in a corner, but a soft system allows you to kind of play a bit more with that world.
I understand. I think it, like, to some extent, um, I think to some extent, it does allow for a little bit more wiggle room when it comes to ability. But I just don't like it when people will take that wiggle. Like I say, if you take an inch, they'll give you a mile. Um, Moderator, can you do me a favor?
At the ready?
I guess I'll start doing this maybe. Can you put an invite link from the Discord and possibly put it in the chat?
Sure.
Now, I will say this: if you join this call while we are debating, you will be banned. I just want to make that abundantly clear to anybody. So you can join the Discord. I don't mind doing that. But if you join the call while I'm debating, You will straight up just be banned.
Uh, Possibly do it like on your socials after the fact. I wouldn't do it now though.
Um,
I believe that's prudent.
yeah, I guess. So if you just go to my socials of the same name, I guess it's Seeking Banter, just like how you spelled it. I'll probably post a link on my social media that will allow you to join the Discord, and then you can show me your art if you want to, and all that good stuff. Um, but I guess I'll have to hold on doing it now because we are in the middle of a debate. But again, I appreciate you following. Um, Sorry, I'm getting a little distracted. uh, yeah, I just don't like. What was I talking? What was I saying? I lost my train of thought.
You're essentially saying that although it does give liberty, if they'll take an inch, they'll take a mile, pretty much.
Right, that's the thing. So it's like if you give an inch, they'll take a mile, and I've seen it done so many times where they can start off fantastically. Some of the best things I've ever read or watched or listened to have been soft magic. But at the same time, I've seen it countless times where it's like they'll write themselves into a corner and then they have to start with the bullshit to get themselves out. Where it's like, okay, well, I'm stuck or I'm losing a plot point or I have to end it quickly, right? So then they'll come up with some bullcrap. A good example of this would be Bleach. Bleach was a perfect example of the bad guys getting stronger and stronger and stronger until they wrote themselves into a corner where they have a guy who can basically read the future. Where it's like, oh yeah, I can read the future. I can know whenever anything's going to happen, always, at every time of the day, no matter what. And it's like, oh man, I wrote myself into a corner with this one because now the bad guy's too freaking strong. It's like you gave him the most broken ability on the face of the earth, where he's basically omniscient, and it's like, how are we gonna get him out of here? Spoiler, by the way, we're gonna freaking do it. Pause for effect so that people who don't want to hear the spoiler can mute me for 5 seconds. Two, three, four, five. Let's do it with a prediction proof arrow. where, where the fuck that came from? Right? Where'd you even make that at? Would he have seen you making it? So it's like, so you wrote yourself into a corner with prediction proof arrows as your solution. And it's like, it's the most stupid thing I've ever heard in my entire life. That's why the last season of Bleach was like the worst season. It almost rivaled Soul Eater's ending.
Oh Lord,
Oh,
not this again.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna keep bringing it up because it was the worst, one of the worst endings in anime history. They literally defeated this dude with the power of friendship. And the worst part is, if they had just waited for the manga to finish, or maybe it just did how the manga did it, it wasn't gonna be bullshit. But it's like, oh man, that's what happens when they just don't have the source material, which kind of goes with what the last debate was, right? Like I was already kind of halfway in, halfway out with the last debate, but what Fumbles was saying was almost 100% correct when it comes to some of the source material, where it's just a lot better. And when it came to the manga for both of these, not the both of these, sorry, when it came to the manga for Soul Eater, the ending made 1,000% sense. It was fantastic. But then you had freaking the anime of Soul Eater, who's like, oh man, we don't have the source material, and what are we gonna do, guys? Well, the bad guy's really strong, and we don't really know what to do. So with us and our uncreative ass, we're just going to have to throw some bullshit in there. Boom! The power of literal friendship, like the literal power of friendship. Me and my friends, and then you punch him in the face, and then the ultimate bad guy dies because of a punch to the face by a 14-year-old girl.
Listen, I understand, but fault a you can't fault a paintbrush for the skill of an artist. If you're trash at art or if you can't write and you write yourself into a hole, that is a product of the artist, not necessarily the tools used. And the hard system, although kind of prevents people from doing this, doesn't really make a difference. You know what I mean? Like, yes, it kind of inhibits it to an extent, but as we've seen previously, there are plenty of hard power systems that use soft systems when convenient, and they still end up in that situation because Soul Eater is a hard power system. Their powers are defined. You know what I mean? It's not necessarily loosey goosey. It was only that one moment in which they just used it poorly, and that was a matter of a writing issue, not a system issue.
I could make the argument that Soul Eater was not a hard magic system. What in God's green earth made Soul Eater a hard magic system?
I what was your example for a girl?
I was saying the
But
same thing.
as far as Soul Eater goes, I would consider it a hard power system because the system and the powers are easily defined. It's a matter of obviously skill, connection between Meister and what are they? A weapon, and then obviously you have the what was it called? What was it? Resonance,
hmm
I believe, is like the power system they use.
Well, it's not necessarily like quantifiable in a way, right? Like when you look at Soul Eater, sure you have the weapons, and then you have the Meisters, but there's no real explanation on how anything really works. It's just, oh yeah, I can turn into a weapon and you can use me. Sure, fine. But what makes the weapon stronger? What makes the Meister stronger? Sure, you have resonance as far as level of ability, but like, what even are you? Like, you know what I mean? Like, it's not. There's no real explanations.
I mean, yes, there's no explanations as to the world itself and world building, but as far as the actual power system goes, I do believe it is explained that someone's resonance or whatever is, yeah, soul resonance. It's like someone's resonance is pretty much just like the frequency to an extent of someone's soul, um how much power it has. So it's like people like Maka, Soul, and even Blackstar, I think they stated at the beginning, and Death the Kid. Maka, Blackstar, and Death the Kid all had incredibly high soul resonance because of just who they were born from. I believe Blackstar, even though we don't know his parents, he was always stated to have incredibly high soul resonance and be incredibly gifted, despite being, kind of a ditzy. And then Maka obviously was a child of two like Death Scythe, an incredibly powerful Meister, which gave her high soul resonance, and Death the Kid is obviously the son of Death, which explains his high soul resonance. So they do have a hard power system, which is why when they did the punch, it was such a slap in the face because it was like, okay, you had the building blocks of soul resonance, and people combining it to kind of create these ultimate attacks, and you kind of was like, well, punch instead of capitalizing off soul resonance.
Well, my biggest thing, the reason why I still having a hard time categorizing it as a hard magic is because it's not, again, and I hate to belabor the point, it's not necessarily quantifiable, right? For example, I'll give a good example of something similar. Star Wars actually made an attempt to turn into a somewhat hard system, or at least a bit of a hard system. The reason I say that is because initially it was a very, very soft system. It was about the force, right? There's no real quantifiable thing about the force. It's just you utilizing the energy of the universe, no matter what that is, and anybody could do it. However, in the first episode, they said, oh, you know, guys, what if we make it a little bit more of a hard system, and we're going to have metachlorians added in, right? Where you have now a quantifiable number where you can now determine how strong with the force that you can be. And so when they when they scanned Anakin, they saw that he was basically born of metachlorians. He had the highest metachlorian count in the world, and he was going to be the savior of the universe and all this other kind of crap. And it was all based off of his quantifiable numbers of metachlorians. So to some extent, I think that even if it's not directly stated, it has to be somewhat quantifiable to be a hard system. Same thing with kind of like with like Dragon Ball Z or Naruto, where it's like it's not directly stated how much chakra or ki you're using. It's still quantified. Well, they even quantified it in Dragon Ball Z, right, with power levels. So it's like that's, I think,
I
a hidden prerequisite to some extent for soft and hard systems is that for a hard system, it needs to be somewhat quantifiable.
I'm going to wholeheartedly disagree with you
Oh, what else is new?
because um that's in my opinion that's not how the systems work. All systems, both hard and soft, use a certain level of some type of invisible power source, whether that's chakra, chi, the force, whatever. They all have a power force that they are drawn to. And a lot of times, people's abilities comes from their connection, attunement, or amount of that power force, whether that's hard or soft. What makes something a hard system or soft system is the limitations on how one can use that invisible power source. For instance, uh, like we said previously in Naruto, you have they all can have higher and lower amounts of this invisible force, but how ones can use it is extremely limited. You have people like Shikamaru who can only do shadows with his source, versus people like the Uchihas who have weird eyeball stuff that allows them to have a lot more range with that same source of power. Versus a softer system, pretty much we all are drawn from the same source of power and we can all use it with the same liberty, which is where I would say you get into things like fairy tale, which I think is a very similar to a lot of these other things, but they kind of let people be freer with it. Yes, everyone has a power, and yes, everyone is still drawn to the same system of chakra and stuff like that, with just your attunement of magic, how much magic you have, but your power isn't limited to a specific group of abilities. For
You
instance, you have people like Urza Scarlet, who soul power is, or I'll say, let's say Lucy Arpelia is a better example, whose soul power was summoning celestial beings. But how she was able to summon them and utilize their power evolved and broke open as the story went on, overall allowing her to break out of that archetype of a useless character and actually be useful.
right. Here's the thing. I think that when it comes to soft systems, there's basically two extremes, right? I think that when you're categorizing soft and hard, there is soft, which I think is on either the one end of the spectrum or the other end of the spectrum when it comes to what you said about um, everybody being able to utilize something, right? Or because I don't think that everybody's able to utilize everything in the solar system, right? Because technically, Superman, the Flash, all those people are technically within soft systems, but not everybody can be Superman, right? Not everybody can. Well, it takes a. There's a couple of flashes, so I don't know about that one in particular. Maybe you could make the argument that people could technically become the Flash if they had a very specific set of circumstances. I guess same thing with like this with Spider Man. Technically, multiple people could be Spider Man if all bitten by spiders. So I think there's like two extremes of the spectrum. Either you have people who are just incredibly unique and their power is infinite, or you have people who can gain their abilities, but then their potential, like I said, is infinite. While hard systems kind of stride in the middle, nice and safe, where because even in uh, even soft, even hard systems, everybody can technically use the abilities, right? Like Naruto, everybody can learn certain jutsus. The sheer amount of people that learn Shadow Clone Jutsu, everybody can do it. So it's like that's not necessarily like a thing where it's like, oh well, not everybody can use it. Like everybody can use jutsus in Naruto. Granted, some people specialize in certain jutsus based off of where you live, but everybody can still use them, right?
I think the issue comes in is how a jutsu can be used. Because what makes, I think the difference between something like Naruto versus something like Fairy Tail is the attainability. Where, yes, everyone has access to chakra and everyone can increase their chakra, but how something can be used is what makes it pretty much stronger or weaker. You know, in Naruto, you have the Uchihas, who their abilities with their Sharingan is like crazy. They can do so many options and have so many liberties with that power to where it's like if you're born Uchiha, great. You have access to all this stuff and you're automatically going to be stronger. Versus if you're born, you know, of whatever clan Tenten's from, hang it up. You know what I mean? Versus in Fairy Tale, everything was attainable. You had the Celestial Wizards, which is what Lucy is, who are only summoners and to an extent can be seen as weaker spellcasters. But Lucy, through her evolution, and what a lot of characters did is have an evolution to where they could become someone like an Urza Scarlet. Versus in other systems that are hard systems, having a side character or a weaker character go to the level of a stronger character like Urza Scarlet is unattainable. You don't even think about it, and it's not an option because it's never going to happen because their power won't allow it. Not necessarily because they don't have the same willpower or attunement to whatever this force is. Shikamaru could have just as much chakra as um, Sasuke. It doesn't mean he's going to be stronger than Sasuke because Sasuke's powers allow him to do more than Shikamaru.
Not necessarily, because there are plenty of people within Naruto who can give hands to Sasuke, and they don't have to be Sasuke. Sasuke's abilities, beyond his inherent abilities of the Uchiha, are not so, you know, powerful and unique that people couldn't defeat him. Perfect example of this would be like um, the first and second Hokage when they first fought Madara, right? The Uchihas, granted, they have powerful abilities, but that doesn't mean that normal people couldn't also achieve equal but powerful abilities themselves. So, like, that's the thing. The first Hokage and second Hokage, when they first fighting the Uchiha clans, were able to fight them back and damn near subjugate them. And it didn't take, oh well they have the black fire and big freaking avatars. It's like they were just able to do it because they were able to train their own level of ability to where they can match them, right? So it's like it's not necessary, and they learn jutsus and developed jutsus and all that kind of stuff, which is another thing. In a hard system, you can still create. That's the big thing that I think you're kind of missing, is that even within a hard system, it still allows for a certain level of creativity with the act of creation. So, like formulas, for example, even in D&D, where you have a set system for magic ability and material components and all these things, you can still create new things to do what you need them to do. Same thing, and that's what they did in Naruto, where it's like, okay, then well, we're gonna have to create new and more advanced countermeasures to fight these freaking monsters that have these eyeballs from Satan. And that's the thing. I think that's kind of what's more important. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna do a little bit of something new, and we're gonna do um our closing statements, and then I'm going to do a little bit of uh chat interaction. I'm gonna try to start doing this more, where like if we have questions and comments and maybe some things that people had said in the chat, then we'll try to address those for like the last bit. Just to have some kind of interaction with the people in the chat, right? So yeah, I get it. So because I see that some people are over here like, oh, you didn't read my comment, and it's like, oh, I'm sorry, did you not hear that I was in a debate? So so um, you can go ahead and well, technically, since you started, I'm going to give my closing statement first,
Okay.
and then you can do yours, and then we'll start doing some stuff with the chat. So my closing statement is going to be fairly simple. I think that the very last point that I made kind of really clinches my argument together, which is even within a hard system, it allows for creation, therefore allows for creativity, right? Within a hard system, even though there are set rules and boundaries, it doesn't necessarily mean you can create things, but those things have to also be within the system, which again, I think keeps a cap on that world and doesn't allow it to fall into the temptation of having an open system in which bullshit can ensue. The sheer amount of bullcrap that I have read is insurmountable for thousands of years. The sheer amount of things that I've read that where people are just like will take advantage of the fact that they've created an open-ended system is absolutely insane. And so I think that the best works. Now, don't get me wrong. There are some great works out there who have soft systems like Lord of the Rings. My opponent said that Lord of the Rings has an open system, and it does. But at the same time, um, I feel like unless you're the one of the best scholarly writers in our time, like Tolkien was, then you might just fall into the trap of writer's block, and then the bullshit comes, and that's my my closing statement.
Okay. Well, as I have stated throughout, I firmly believe that a softer system allows for creativity and opportunity for all characters within a storyline. And by utilizing all characters in a storyline, you have more to play with and you don't get locked into writer's block because, as previously stated, there are weaknesses for people who are strong. And when it comes to hard systems, although, yes, they allow you to have a cleaner storyline and more concrete power scaling, it greatly hinders and stunts the growth of side characters and other characters who don't have strong powers. People like people like Shikamaru, people like Tenten, all from Naruto, are going to suffer in that world because their power system doesn't allow them to grow. They can't further expand it. Even with the amount of chakra of other people, they can't actually make anything with their power because it has concrete rules. Ino's always going to have to go outside of her body. Shikamaru's always going to have to stay still. And the fact that they can't break out of that is what makes a power system hard for characters to flourish and thrive versus things like Fairy Tail, where they can grow and thrive. You see characters continue to grow and utilize the powers in different ways to where a summoner can now go and have armors like Urza. You have a script mage who can go and rewrite grimoires into saving people's lives. And they're not sitting here throwing meteors at each other and blowing up planets because they have a ceiling in that world. So a soft system, when done correctly, can still have a ceiling, still be neat and clean, and still allow for the growth of the characters that you want to see. And that is my statement.
Okay. All right. So now, Maud, you can unmute yourself. You can be a part of this. I know you've just been sitting there, collecting dust.
Well, I did have a couple questions for each of you, but the battle was so riveting this time around, I found no place to step in.
I mean, what were the questions?
Well,
I can
before
ask if you're willing to answer.
we'll probably want to answer, but let's actually do a little bit of the chat's questions and concerns first. I
Of
see that
course.
Fro Girl really had something that she wanted to say, and I'm trying to see what she was talking about. She says, uh, "No comment on my example. Was your example my gift level 9,999 unlimited gotcha backstab in a backwater dungeon? I don't know what that is."
I'm assuming it's an anime.
Well, yeah, right. I can tell by the length of the name that it's definitely like an anime or a manga, but it's like I've never personally heard of it. Let me look it up. My gift. Hold on, here it is. As soon as I put in my gift, it showed right up. Nope. I've never seen this. What about it? I was curious about what your comment was or what you were trying to convey. My example was actually, Mod, can you read that?
My example was the Unlimited Gacha anime. A guy at the lowest level was left to die. He only became stronger when he realized that he can use his ability where the mana was at its highest concentration. While he was on the upper level, he would always get low level gachas, and therefore he was considered trash. While in the abyss, he forms an army with high levels, and he himself became level 9,999 by training. He wanted revenge on those who left him to die.
Oh, I know what this is. I read the manga for this actually a long time ago. I stopped reading it because it was slow with the releases, but I guess they came up with an anime. I remember this guy. Um, Go ahead and read her second message.
At this point, he's dangerous. Later, he changes his mind and decides to protect the world instead of destroying it. What type of system is this, and what would have happened if he hadn't changed his mind?
What would happen if he would change his mind? He would destroy the world, right? Because that was his goal. And the thing about it is, it's technically a soft system because there was no upper limit or cap or anything of that nature when it came to the level of the people that he was summoning. Now, if they had a system where it's like, oh, well, we have classes and levels, then it would be considered a hard system. But because they were just freakishly like, is the upper level 9,999? Like every single one of his people that he summoned that level as well?
I feel like they could fit an extra zero in there if they really tried.
That's what I'm saying. So he could have just made it to freaking 100,000. But that's the thing. So it's like, I guess technically, in a way, you could consider it hard, but it's definitely one of those. I would consider it definitely a soft system because there's no limit on the amount of gotchas he could freaking. The gotchas unlimited. So it says it in the name. The gotcha's unlimited. So it's like there's no set amount of people that he can draw. They're all freakishly powerful because of well, some kind of arbitrary great mana area bullshit. And so it's like he can just unlimitedly draw level 99 people and create armies and destroy the universe if he freaking wanted to. He can only summon. Wow, you wrote that uniquely. He can only sum in high level gotchas while in the abyss. Yeah, sure, that's fine and dandy. I understand that, but like, that's your only barrier. So as long
I
as you're
mean, technically, in that sense, it technically could exist in a hard power system only because um in that case there are defined rules and barriers. It's just that that world has a high ceiling. And I was going, and then now that we have kind of wrapped it up, I was going to say that upon my looking into this idea of hard and soft magic systems, a lot of people also categorize this into irrational and rational as well, as far as it looks more like a T, to where it's hard and soft going up and down, and then rational and irrational going left to right.
okay, so
So
it's
in
like
that case, it
X
would be
and
more of
Y.
a hard irrational.
Okay, so it's like X and Y axis basically.
Yes, so it's like you have a hard system that could be more irrational and have a high ceiling, which could be an example of this anime, versus something that has a soft system and is rational would go into, the opposite side. You know what I mean?
Right, that would have been incredibly useful information at the beginning of the at the beginning. Actually, I think would have probably changed the whole entire debate. But
I didn't see it servicing me, so I decided to leave it out for my benefit. But
wow, you suck. So you just basically
yes,
lied of omission, you piece of garbage.
I
Anyway,
I
mean,
can tell which one of you has read The Art of War.
exactly.
okay, crap. He has not read The Art of War, by the way. I'll give you $1
Yes,
if you can tell me. I'll give you $1 if you can tell me who wrote it.
it's instinctively in my heart. Okay.
Yeah, bullshit.
Strike your enemy where they are not.
All right. I'll go ahead and allow more maybe questions or comments to come through. But while that's happening, what was your question, moderator?
Well, I had one for each of you. I don't know if you had a preference as to who would like to answer.
Um, I'll go first, I guess.
So, my question for you was, do hard magic systems condition the viewer to think less critically about the symbolism of the story? For example, if a plot calls a rock, then it would be difficult to see past the surface level of that thing.
I need you to do me a favor, and I need you to dumb down your question. Imagine you're
Uh,
telling it to a 4-year-old.
sure. So if a certain character's power was symbolic of something, maybe their grief of a lost loved one, or let's just go with that. But the hard magic system has explained every detail of what that power is, where it comes from, and what it does. Would that stop the viewer from being able to think about what that power would mean symbolically for that character?
Um, I guess technically it could in a way. Like, I'm trying to think of an example where maybe that's applicable as far as, are you talking about like the intensity? Like for
I'm talking about, yeah, like this character was created with an aesthetic and design to serve a point, something that's not directly said to the viewer, but through the constant explanation of the hard magic system, it kind of starts being difficult to see things for any more than what they've been told to be seen as.
um, can you think of an example?
Sure. Karapika's Nen contract from X Hunter.
Right. And what about his power?
Well, his whole thing was he wanted to. What was it? The Spider Troop.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, he wanted to kill all those guys, so he made a Nen contract where, like, if he were to use his Nen on anyone other than the Spider Troop, that there was like a needle with like a chain that would like stab him in his
that
heart
is
and kill him
hard.
instantly. Yeah. But later on in the story, you learn a little bit more about Karapika and his backstory and everything. But you couldn't really put two and two together about why the Nen contract took the form that it did. Simply because they spent how many pages explaining exactly what a Nen contract was and what Karapika's did.
Right. But the thing about it is, Hunter x Hunter is a hard system.
Right. That's the what the essence of the question is.
Right. So the
Do
answer
hard
is
systems stop you from being able to see the symbolic nature of the story?
then the I'm gonna have to say no. The reason being is because I think that you can still get your point across, and I think if anything, I think it may even work better because you have to explain it to some extent, right? Because you can have somewhat I guess soft esque systems where it's like, okay, well, a part of the system is your level of commitment, right? Which was technically why his ability was as powerful as it was, because it was a certain level of commitment or promise, right? So it's like by you putting your life on the line and making an oath that I'm only going to use my powers for this one purpose, it allowed your ability to kind of get stronger. So I think that if anything, I think it would make more sense in a soft system than a hard system, right? Because if it was a soft system, it would basically just be the Hulk. It's I'm
Mm,
so sad, I'm so angry, I'm so emotional, where now my power could just soar infinitely. And if I just feel more of that ability, then I'll get stronger. You know what I mean? But it's like in a soft system, it's like now you have to be creative and you have to figure out ways to push yourself beyond the boundary in order to get stronger.
understood. That does make sense. Uh, as for you, Virzu, I do have a question for you as well.
By all means.
Are the viewer's stakes of a story sacrificed in exchange for character focus in a soft system? Anticipation can be difficult to cultivate in your audience if there's no direct understanding of what could possibly happen.
Um,
It's a good question.
I'm trying to fully understand the scope of the question. Um, Say it one more time.
Sure. Are the viewer's stakes of a story sacrificed in exchange for character focus in a soft system? Anticipation can be difficult to cultivate in your audience if there is no direct understanding of what can happen.
Base.
I'm going I'm going to say no. I don't think the viewers experience a sacrifice because there are more ways you can reveal something other than just brute force and you know how it's solved. You know what I mean? Like there are definitely certain soft systems, which again is more of a writer flaw than anything, where people do, say, okay, well, oh, I don't know what to do, so I'm just going to be hyper emotional and get through it that way. And in that case, it is like, okay, wow, shocker, who would ever seen that coming? You know what I mean? But you know, there are cases where not everything is simply brute force, and a soft system allows you to kind of bend outwards and do other things. An example, in my opinion, would be in, let's say, like Fairy Tale, where, at the end, spoilers, uh, at the end of the day, it was never oh, I'm gonna brute force my way into beating this bad guy. It was actually always something on the opposite side. For instance, I believe Lucy at one point had to rewrite book END, which was a contract that pretty much made it to where I think if Zareth died, then Natsu died. And then again later on, you know, there's at one point where they all had lost and it was just Lucy. And to win the battle and to win the thing, she had to break a key, and with the breaking of that key, you then brought in Spirit King, which is a secret contract that can be made by a celestial wizard. And it was something that, we didn't see coming. It brought great emotional impact. And it kind of brought in to fruition this new era of a character, which is essentially, I believe, was the catalyst of breaking open her power, which honestly, I believe could only be done in a soft system. Elsewise, they would have just lost. You know what I mean?
Heard. Uh,
So,
Frogirl, what do you mean by your last message? I apologize if I'm interrupting, Seeking.
no, you're good. I was. Did he answer your question?
I believe you did, yeah.
Okay, I was just. Maybe I misunderstood your question. I thought you were asking basically the fact that you have a sauce system basically kind of gives way for almost infinite power. And so, are you sacrificing stakes, meaning your character being in any real danger for the sake of developing your characters?
Right, that was the question.
I
As
believe I answered that because I think the point I was making was that not all problems are solved by brute force. There are problems and other things that you can just be like, oh, well, I have unlimited power, so I'm gonna just unlimited my power into victory. You still lose because it's a soft system. Your enemies have access to that power too. So that's when you get into alternate kind of impacts other than displays of strength. You get into displays of sacrifice, displays of, emotion and stuff like that, which still, gets your audience in this idea of stakes. Is not necessarily the stake of winning or losing. It could be the stake of, you know, I'm gonna do this, but I'm gonna lose all my power. Like in what was it? It was like kind of My Hero esque, where it's like, okay, they seemingly could have infinite power, but doing this, they're gonna lose that power. You know what I mean?
mm-hmm.
It's kind of the same thing with granted, they overused it a bunch, but like in Fairy Tail and Jujutsu Kaisen, the whole suicide technique. It's like it's high stakes, and yes, it technically could be infinite power, but you still feel that stake. Now, granted, if you do it at the beginning of every fight, that stake is gone. No one cares no more. But you know, there's other ways to feel and tug at like that stress. You know what I mean?
I guess. Um. Okay, so Frogo is saying, are those the ability that Kurapika are not allowed to use on others? Are his assassin abilities included, basically? Basically, he couldn't use his Nen
You're thinking about
abilities.
Killua.
Oh yeah, you're talking about Killua, I think. Frogirl.
That's the
Kurapika,
white haired dude.
yeah, the Kurapika is the blonde one with the red eyes, who's basically based off of Naruto or one or the other. I think, I think one's
Sasuke is based off of Kurapika.
Kurapika. Yeah, I was like, I know
Yeah,
one is based off the other, but no, you're we're talking about a different person. We're talking about the blonde guy. Um, he couldn't
with
use
the
his
scarlet eyes.
yeah, he couldn't use his ability on anybody but the spider trip people, or else he would die. Yeah,
Yes,
Yeah,
chains.
chains.
yeah, the chains. So yeah, it's a different guy. Um, if we don't have any more questions, then it seems like it's about that time to wrap it up. I can still see your chat, so if you have any other questions, try to get them in like 60 seconds, I guess. But if that's the end of it, then it's about time to wrap it up. I'm gonna start saying my goodbyes. I'd like to thank everybody for coming and thank everybody for watching. I was gonna say this. You know that you know the guy who came in. What was the first name? Marshmallow.
Oh yeah.
You know he unfollowed.
No way.
Yeah, like I watched him follow, and then because I guess I wasn't addressing him about the Discord thing, they unfollowed. Now,
Wild.
now I could be wrong, but I know how many followers I have and how many I had. It went from 6 to 7, and then as soon as like I was like, oh yeah, I can just send the Discord in the thing. It went back to 6. Yeah,
I guess they just wanted their art seen.
that's what I'm saying. I'm like, I'm not a big enough platform in any capacity where I thought it'd be worth it for you to try to advertise on here. You know what I mean? He wanted you to talk about his art. What was I supposed to do? Like critique your art to people? Like, oh man, this is great. Let me share it with all my friends, and also display it on my stream. Like that wasn't gonna happen, right? And then he was fishy from the beginning. Look, I try to have faith that maybe people just like my streams. Like maybe he could be even if he was sketchy, I would have appreciated the follow nonetheless. Like I was willing to put up
Right.
with a bot if they followed. Since this was at 100, yeah, I don't know. I was totally willing to be like, oh yeah, man, I'll totally look at your art as long as you follow. You know what I mean? Like, if I don't see that follow, you're not gonna get your art looked at. You know what I mean? So it's like I was like, I'm willing to, as long as I get that follow, I don't care. But yeah, what you gonna do? I don't know why I did that. I pressed the button. I thought that it was gonna refresh something, so ignore that. Nobody followed. Somebody had that was from a month ago. All the interruption, I knew something was up. Yeah, honestly, I was getting a little distracted because I was like, "Oh shoot, a new follower? That sounds great for me." And so I was trying to make them feel welcomed and accommodated to some extent, but I guess they just wanted to advertise their art. The worst part is, I was probably gonna look at the art after the stream. Some people are just impatient, or maybe it was just some kind of bot. I don't know, but oh well. Well, I'd like to thank our moderator for once again moderating our debate.
Of course, thank you for having me.
And I'd like to thank my opponent, Verzu, for showing up and debating me.
No problem.
Alrighty, make sure you guys check out the YouTube. That's where I post the full VODs unedited so that you guys can always go back and share it with your friends. I'd like to thank all of you for watching. Make sure you guys follow me on all the social medias and all the other kind of stuff. Share it with your friends. Share it with your friends. I know you guys at least know one or two people that might be interested in this particular topic. Even though I knew nothing about anime. Okay. Yeah, so just share it with your friends, your coworkers, your boss. Hey, maybe your boss is a weeaboo. If that's the case, send him over here. Maybe he'll enjoy some of these debates. Once again, I'd like to thank you all for coming and watching. My name is C King, and this is C King Banter. All my social medias have the exact same name, so you can just type in C King Banter on any platform, and it will show up. Make sure you follow. I'll try to post. I'm not going to post regularly. I'm going to be real honest with you. I'm not going to post regularly, but at the same time, I will make sure that I let you guys know ahead of time that there's going to be debates. There should be like I said, I tried to debate every Tuesday and Friday. The next debate topic is going to be creative liberty versus creative butchery. On my social media, I'm also going to maybe post a link to the Discord. You guys can join the Discord, and hey, maybe you can write some suggestions about things you want to see that you want to see debated. In the future, I'll probably expand my pool of people who I debate with, as long as they understand that they're going to have to use a face cam because I don't trust strangers. That being the case, yeah, so you guys can also join the Discord eventually. I know some of you already have. So, once again, I'd like to thank you all for watching, and I will talk to you later. Bye bye.